Good to go.
Welcome, everybody, for Engineering Cool Careers panel. Thank you so much for being here today. Our first speaker is Andrea Ashwood. She's a lead thermal engineer for spectacles working at Snap Incorporated. She earned her PhD in mechanical engineering from University of Wisconsin-Madison. And outside of work, she's also on the advisory board for Interviewing.io. So let's welcome Andrea, and you have the floor.
Hi, everyone. Since I'm kicking this off, I'm probably gonna just be terrible at it. Let's just get going on the journey. So first of all, thermal engineer is sort of a weird one in tech, I think, just because people don't necessarily think about thermals with respect to tech. So Spectacles is a hardware product. That means it's a physical thing that we build. And for those of you who've never seen them, they are AR glasses. This is what they look like. And basically what happens is you turn things on and start playing games and different things like that, and things get hot. So my job is to dissipate that heat, move it around, make it so that the things that are super duper important for the product don't overheat and shut down. I'm sure many of you have experienced this on your phones, especially like on a hot day, if you're at the beach or if you're outside in the sun, you start doing something and then your phone has to shut down so it can cool down. So my job is to make sure that that doesn't happen. And if it does have to happen, that we do it in a way that is not completely shutting things down so that the user can't use the product. With respect to journeys and how did I get here? I kind of don't know how I got here. It was a little, it's been a very windy road. As she said, I went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison, which is like the Berkeley of the Midwest, for those of you who've never had the privilege of going to Wisconsin. I actually got a scholarship to study engineering, but I thought engineers drove trains and I didn't really know why they wanted me to do that. But if they were going to pay me to go to school to learn how to do it, then I was going to do it. It wasn't until I actually got into the coursework and the classwork that I understood the sort of core function of engineering. And I was a student athlete. I ran track and field. I would say I spent the majority of my first 2 years being more of an athlete than a student. And so when it came time to declare a major, I realized that my GPA was not great. I actually didn't have the requirements to get into any engineering programs except for mechanical engineering. So I said, sure, I'll pick that one. I'm not kidding. That's how it happened. I did not like mechanical engineering when I first started. It's a lot of structures. It's a lot of mechanics. I liked building things, but I didn't necessarily like the mathematics behind how to do it. And I had an internship at Harley Davidson, which was super cool. And I had a really great boss, and he said, look, engineering's hard. It's hard for everyone. Don't be discouraged by your GPA. I've seen your work this summer, like you would be a great engineer. So that was really helpful to sort of give me a kick in the pants to keep going. And that following semester was when I got into energy systems. So thermodynamics, fluid dynamics, heat transfer. And I found that to be super duper interesting. And I would just go up to a professor whose class I liked and start chatting with them and ask them if they had a research lab and if I could stop by and check it out. And in doing that, I actually really got interested in doing research. And one of those professors became my mentor, and he encouraged me to go to graduate school. So I would say if you met me in undergrad, I would probably be the last person you would think of who would have a PhD. But here I am, and it's really fun. How I got into consumer space, I started off doing renewable energy. Actually, I wanted to work in solar and some of these other renewable energies and save the world. I got an opportunity to do an internship at the National Renewable Energy Lab in Colorado doing geothermal power production. And that was really fun, but also like very slow moving. Government labs are just not where exciting things happen. It's a little bit more of academic exercise for a lot of these things. And I wanted to be where the like fun and exciting things were. So that's what led me to Silicon Valley. And I was at like 3 or 4 failed startups before I got the opportunity to work at Snap. And at least so far, we're not failing. So that's really nice and wonderful. I would say with respect to my day-to-day, what does like a day in the life look like? It sort of depends on where we are in the build cycle. So when you're making a product, it starts off with like concepting, like what does this thing do? How big can it be? That comes from designers and like ergonomic engineers to figure out like if this thing is on your face, like what's the weight that's comfortable. Then we like extrapolate all of the things that we need to put in the product. And then sort of my stuff comes last. And so it's a lot of compromise and it's a lot of sort of talking through the problem and what do I actually need in order to make the product work versus like what's nice to have, that sort of thing. It's a lot of trade-offs. In the beginning, I used computer software to do what's called computational fluid dynamics, which sounds really fancy, but it really just means that I take the geometry of the product and I do a bunch of math and fluid equations within the software to figure out how hot the thing would be. Once we've designed it, then we get to build it. That's really fun. We do a lot of our builds right now in Taiwan. And so it's really fun to sort of see the product that you've been ideating like in your head and like on the computer screen and see it like physically in person. And then see like how the line gets to put it all together. That's really fun. Once we have a prototype, then it's a lot of testing. So I get the thing, I turn it on, I maybe do some gaming or something like that can put a load on it and then make sure that the temperatures are all aligned to like how we design the product. So I guess I would say, depending on where we are in the process, my day-to-day can look very different. But I like that. I don't want to be in front of my computer all day. So it's really nice to be able to have aspects of my job also be in the lab. It also means that I get to do fun firmware and like software debugging, as well as like the hardware part of putting everything together. And I really enjoy that. Let's see, what else? Interviewing.io is a really cool program that I'm excited to be a part of on their advisory board. Essentially, the general thesis is that resumes suck and don't actually tell you who can code. And so it ends up being a tool that companies can use to actually interview software engineers, but to do it in a way where you're giving people problems to code and then seeing how well they do. We try really hard to do things like voice modulation, you don't know gender, and you don't even know people's names because none of those things are important with respect to people's ability to code. And sort of the idea behind it is that hopefully we can start to remove some of the biases that people have inherently in their interviewing practices. We also do mock interviews and practice interviews on platform because the data suggests that the better you get better at interviewing, the more you do it. And then all of the big tech companies are folks that we utilize to do those mock interviews. So it's Google engineers and Twitter and Facebook and Snap and all of those places. I'm still trying to figure out how to make it work for hardware. Right now, we specifically focus on software engineers. And I think that's pretty much it. So thank you. I'm super excited to be here. And if I've convinced anybody to think about doing hardware, I feel like I've done a good thing.
Thank you so much. You know, your journey really shows that career is not really linear. There are a lot of paths that you evolve and grow into, and with internships, you get to explore different opportunities. So what a great experience that you were able to really contribute to. So we'll open up the floor for questions. You can raise your question All right. Um,
I'll break the ice.
Anand?
Yeah, I'll break the ice with the first question. So thank you so much, Andrea, for sharing. And I want to, so our program focuses specifically on targeting students of color, women in, women in STEM, kind of supporting those kind of paths. Is if you could give like the younger you one piece of advice kind of along your educational journey or career path, what would you tell them? What do you wish you knew then that you know now?
I would say you're not stupid. No one knows what's going on. It took me a really long time to understand that if I didn't get it, like it was likely that other people didn't get it. I just thought it was a me thing. So yeah, I think that's the main thing I would tell myself.
Yeah, it definitely, we develop, and I always tell the students, take the first steps that's in front of you, and the rest is going to evolve as you go, because we can't predict the future, but as you were taking really that resilient approach to be able to test drive careers and different opportunities, and you were just such a great example of that. So thank you so much, Andrea.
Yeah, absolutely. You'd also be very surprised how unwilling people are to ask questions because they don't want to look stupid. I worked at a startup. This is actually my first real job after my internship. And the entire time I was there, I was like, this doesn't make sense. So I would talk to it was super small. It was like 10 people. We're trying to revolutionize air conditioning by applying rocket nozzle technology to cooling. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Let's do that. So it was like a team of 10, only women in the whole company. And only Black person in the whole company too, just in case that wasn't obvious. And I remember when I started and the physics didn't make sense to me. And so I went to our CTO and I was like, Tom, I really don't understand like how you're rectifying this part. And he's like, oh, you just got here, wait until you it totally makes sense. You just need to sit with it for a little bit and then you'll get it. And I'm like, okay. I'm like 2 months in, 3 months in, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And basically what they had done was the way that they had measured a key parameter was completely wrong, like completely. And I'm thinking, okay, but that's not how thermodynamics works. Like you can't measure that way. And they're like, no, you just got here, kid, you don't know. And these are all like grown men. And I'm like, 28 years old. But it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Fast forward, we're running out of money because we can't get the thing to work and we're trying to figure out what's going on. And our VP of engineering had been promoted to CTO. And pardon language, but he goes, you've been bitching about this since you got here. What are you talking about? So I go to the board and I write out like the equations. And I'm like, if I'm right, this thing goes from being this cute little thing like this to having to be the size of this room, which in a commercial air conditioner makes no sense. And he's like, whoa, how long will it take you to like figure this out? I was like, about 10 minutes and however long it takes the machine shop to build it. He's like, do it. So I do it, I'm right. And like, I submit my data on a Friday and the company shut down the following Wednesday. And on the face of it, it's like, oh man, I proved myself out of a job. My mom was so mad. But the flip side of it was the venture capitalist who was funding that company was so thankful that he hired me to do a consulting job after that, like a lessons learned if anyone else wanted to come in with an idea for cooling. And he got me a job at one of his other startups when they didn't even have a position open. Like he was like, no, hire her before she goes somewhere else. And I like literally like kicked it for 3 months until they created a role for me. So like, be the person who's standing up to go, this doesn't make any sense. We need those people.
That is awesome, Andrea. You were able to save the company and being able to be assertive with all of your skills. And it just,
if they'd listened to me sooner, they would have saved like 10 mil.
Yeah. And thankfully you were able to speak up and say something. And that's just your confidence with your skills also that you were able to, demonstrate. So we have 2 questions we're going to try to answer. We have like 3 minutes or so. So Martha, do you want to unmute yourself and share, ask your question?
Oh, hi, Andrea. I appreciate your feedback because I was in the same situation myself. I'm studying to hopefully become a mechanical engineer, and I'm awful in math. Everything as far as like the career aspect is concerned is like I'm in love with it, right? But the math and the physics is killing me. So I'm glad I wasn't the only one in self-doubting myself of the career choice that I guess applied myself into.
You are not.
Um,
I failed Calc 2 the first time.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was too stupid to drop it and just like try again. I was like, no, I got this. No, I didn't have it. It totally failed the first time. Yeah.
I think more or less, like I'm going through a process right now where I guess I networked with this gentleman here, and he wanted to give me an internship, right? And he was like, yeah, I really want you to have this internship. And I was really excited because this is like my first experience ever to have involving in an internship. So I don't know how everything goes. Like I'm out here YouTubing it, having like counseling sessions with like some counselors. But overall, I'm at the part where he's saying like what the objectives is, right? And I don't know nothing other than mechanical engineering is so broad. It could be in the civil aspect, it could be in the military aspect. And I just really just want to know, like, what can I do within my field? Like, how can I say that without saying, like, I don't care what it is. I just want to do something within my field just to know, like, oh, this is something that I really want to go towards the path to.
So is your question how to frame the conversation with this person, or is your question just
Well,
like,
both. Like, what would
okay,
you recommend saying that without saying, like, oh, you're not oblivious to what you want? Because I don't want to sound like, oh, well, you're not trying hard enough. You're not investing in yourself to figuring out what you want to do.
no, listen, it's so broad. It is so broad. And so it is not an unreasonable ask to say, hey, I'm unclear what specifically like this internship would entail. That's not a rude question at all. So that's number one. I think the second thing I would say, like with respect to what can you do in mechanical engineering, the answer is really annoying because it's like you can really do anything. So you've got automotive, you've got oil and gas, you've got, like you were saying, civil. There's some aspects of civil you could do with an ME degree. It's kind of up to you to sort of decide. But when I say decide, I don't mean that you need to stay in it. So I started out in renewable energy, and now I'm making AR glasses, right? So wherever you end up starting does not dictate that you have to be there for 20 years. Because what you'll often find, especially in like manufacturing, it's really great to learn the like processes and like how to step through like a cycle of something. But the specifics of manufacturing is not something that you would like carry over to consumer. But the core function of what an ME does there does that make sense? So you're not necessarily going to be doing the exact same thing, but the foundation is going to be similar sort of across the board, which is you're going to take all of the tools that you've learned in class and you're going to figure out how to solve a problem that probably no one solved before, or if they did solve it, they did it in a way that you can't do it this time. Is that helpful?
No, absolutely. It makes me feel more comfortable.
Yeah, so don't, with respect to this internship, this could be really cool or it could suck, but it has no merit on what the next thing is that you do, because what you'll take from it is work experience. I worked this thing, I learned these things. I learned these things which are not things that I want to do again. And sometimes I learned these things which were kind of fun. And it'll be a mixed bag. And then you'll take whatever positive things from it and you'll like roll that into the next experience.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you for your question. That is such valuable advice that you gain experience and be able to take that and then continue with your growth process. So let's thank Andrea for being here today, sharing your career journey. We appreciate you, and I know you have to leave. So thank you so much, and we look forward to stay in touch with you again.
Absolutely. I'm going to drop my email address in the chat. Feel free to email me if you have a question and I didn't get to answer it, okay?
Thank
That's
you.
very generous of you. Thank you.
So now we're going to go to our next speaker, Naira Aslam. Naira is a chartered engineer. She earned her master's degree in civil engineering from UK, and she's a program manager 3 at AECOM, where she worked her entire career for 15 years. She worked all over the world with various roles, and currently she's a program manager 3 for the aviation team in the West Coast. And in this role, she worked on LAX at the executive technical manager on a landslide access modernization program. And she has worked on some very memorable projects, such as the London 2012 Olympics Games, the new Istanbul airport, and now LAX. So let's welcome Naira, and you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Gohar. Thank you. Actually, first time I'm doing this in the US, and as Gohar mentioned, I got all my education from the UK, so that's the accent, in case you think it's Australian, but it's British. It's really nice to be here and actually be part of something like this and to be encouraging and explaining what STEM is, because I remember back in the day when I was thinking about what I wanted to do, I had no idea what engineering is. I didn't know any engineers. There was no one in my family who was engineers or anything like that. So I had no idea what I wanted to do, to the point where when I was a kid, every month, every week, I would change what I want to do. Some days I want to be a nurse, then I might want to be a teacher, then I might want to be like a housewife, then I might want to be an accountant. I had no idea what I wanted to do. All I knew is that I enjoyed math and science, and I wanted to travel with my job. That were my requirements. That was it, basically. And how I fell into engineering is a bit of an odd story. I have an older sister who's actually, she's a lawyer in Australia. And also she kind of just fell into her industry as well. At the time, she's like a decade older than me. At the time, she was dating an engineer, and I ended up talking to her then boyfriend, who was a chemical engineer, and he taught me about engineering. So I was 15 at the time, had no idea what I wanted to do, learned about engineering from this one person, and he inspired me to go and explore, go and investigate, see what it was all about. And in terms of engineering as a career, there's so many different choices. I think as Andrea was mentioning, she's a mechanical engineer, but even within mechanical, you can do so many different things. I'm a civil engineer, so civil engineers, I think we've got a few on the call today. We build and maintain the environment you see around you. So from football stadiums through to the roads that we all drive on, to the rail tracks we're in, even the sewage systems we have running underneath everything, all designed somewhere with civil engineers and a whole host of different engineers. So me choosing to be an engineer was, I don't want to say a mistake, but it just kind of happened. I didn't set my mind to doing it, but I thought I'd go with it. And in the UK, the education system is very different to the US. And I gotta admit, I still don't understand how the US system works because it confuses me. So I'm not surprised that you guys have to do stuff like this because I still don't get it. But so from age 18 is when we go into college or university, as it's called in the UK. And from that age is when you decide what you're going to study in. So you don't do a degree and then you do your major, you go straight into doing your major. So the first 18 months or so of my 4-year degree, we did general engineering. So I did things like fluid mechanics and I did structural engineering. I would do some chemical engineering. And then after about a year or so, 18 months, I started specializing in civil engineering. And then by the end of everything, I had a master's in civil engineering. So great, now what? I did a couple of internships. I actually worked for the Environment Agency, which is the equivalent of the Environment Protection Agency here in the US. So I did some flood schemes. So how do, like in the UK, rain is an issue, as I'm seeing here in Santa Monica right now, which is kind of disappointing. It's a bit rainier here than in the UK right now. But designing flood systems, I did that with the Environment Agency. And then I did an internship with a company called Fable Monsell, which is a British civil engineering company. which was eventually bought out by Aecon, which is the company I now work for. So I graduated way back when. I've been with Aecon for 15 years. And over the course of 15 years, I've done a whole host of things. So the first 7 years of my life or so, first 7 years of my career, sorry, I started off as a traffic engineer. And the reason why I did traffic engineering is my first few weeks on the job, I was actually building traffic simulation models. And I know that doesn't sound that great, but I love gaming and things like that. And I was getting to build all these little worlds. And it might have just been of roads and things like that, and traffic and seeing vehicles moving along. But I got to build these little worlds and see how all the traffic interacts with each other. We could change everything. You'd go out on site, see how people drive, what their behavior is like. And that's how I fell into traffic engineering. I kept doing that for a couple of years, slowly working my way up through, kind of working hard and proving over and over and over again that I could do what I said I could do. And eventually in about 2010, so a couple of years after I graduated, the Olympics was happening in London. And one of the big things, in LA, we deal with a lot of congestion, a lot of traffic. But the thing about LA is much more spread out. London as a city is much more condensed. So imagine the same amount of vehicles, but in a much smaller space. So we have a lot of different types of problems to deal with. Like a lot of people want to use the buses. We have great public transport system out there. So we have the underground metro and the overground metro as well. And then people want to use their cars. So how is all that going to fit together during the Olympics, especially when we had a lot of people coming in from all over the world to do this? So that was my role, is we had a lot of stuff happening in London and then things happening all across the UK. So as part of the team, designing all the traffic management that was going to happen for the Olympics. So that was very, very cool. And the thing about engineering, or civil engineering in particular, is you can work on a design project for 5 years before you see anything being put into the ground. So that was something that I didn't really expect in engineering. So the great thing about the Olympics is things I was designing in 2010 were happening in 2012. So I was seeing things happen in real life and real time. I was out there in the Olympics and trying to fix problems as they were occurring. And for me, that was really fun. And off the back of that, so we also have something called the Commonwealth Games, which doesn't involve the US. It involves all the countries that are part of the Commonwealth, which is about 88 different countries around the world. It's very similar to the Olympics, but it doesn't include the US. It actually includes Canada, Australia, the UK, a lot of countries across Asia and across Africa. And so it's very similar to the Olympic Games, but they were happening in Scotland, in Glasgow in Scotland. And I worked on that for a couple of years, then doing the same sort of thing, but I had 5 regions under my control. I was responsible for making sure they operate all the traffic, everyone get in and out perfectly. So that was fantastic. And that happened in 2014. And then after that, I was like, okay, now what do I do? I've kind of done these big, amazing projects and I really enjoyed them. Like, now what do I do? I had no idea. And this is where I decided to kind of change my career path a little bit. I wanted to do something as exciting and as exhilarating as those projects had been, but I didn't know what else I could do. After you do something as big as the Olympics, and I know we've got them coming in LA in 2028, I was like, it doesn't really get much bigger than that, to be honest, as an engineer and that kind of thing. So then I decided to change that, and just through a series of fortunate events, I happened to move into business development. So for the same company, I moved into business development. So I stopped doing all design and I moved into more, how are we going to win more projects for other people to design in the company? So it was much more about the strategy of the company. It was about how our operations are, if we need to recruit new people, if we need to move into new regions of the world, we need to move into new sectors, if we need to work with other sectors, do we need to hire in more mechanical engineers? So it's much more varied. And I used to travel a lot with that role. So the area I covered was UK and Ireland, and then Europe, Middle East, Africa, and India for a short while as well. And I traveled that whole role, figuring out the strategy we had for the next 5 years. And so that was fantastic. And I did that just for our aviation sector. And that's how I fell into working on Istanbul Airport. So I don't know how many people here might have traveled to Istanbul or anywhere else in Asia, but chances are the company I work for has done some work there, and I might have even worked there on a little bit as well. So it was great. I mean, it was a whole different side of engineering that no one had ever explained to me. It was much more about actually building relationships with people. So I didn't do anything technical whatsoever anymore. I forgot all those hundreds of equations I learned back in university and college days. And it's all about the people and the strategy and thinking very differently and seeing much more the business side of things. So it's kind of interesting to go from pure engineering to the business side of things and the operational side of things. Again, with the foundation of having engineering, so that then helped. So I did that for quite a few years, and through that, I made great connections on a global level. So I was very lucky to be in the right place at the right time. And luck is everything when it comes to having a career that works for you. Luck is everything. It doesn't matter how hard you work or how talented you might be, any of that stuff. Luck is a big deal. I know it's helped me out a lot. And it was just through that career progression, meeting those people, that this amazing opportunity for me, turned up in LA. And that dream I had when I was 15 is like, I want to work internationally and do something big internationally. It was starting to happen. So then I moved to LA, and the company I worked for, AECOM, the headquarters were actually in LA, so it was a global company, which meant I could move anywhere and work anywhere with them. So I moved to LA in 2019 to work at LAX. And I'm pretty sure almost everyone on the call, when I say LAX, there's probably collective drones going around everywhere. And my job is to kind of come in and help fix that. So we are doing the Landside Access Modernization Program, which is basically the metro is being extended about 2 miles out to the airport. We're building another elevated train that's going to go from the metro all the way into the airport. So when it's all complete, you may not even need to take your car to LAX, which I'm sure for LA would be a very nice thing. There's been really fascinating things as a traffic engineer coming to LA where people are so dependent on their cars. Seeing how that all fits together is kind of interesting to me. And then, so now I've been doing that for about 3 years. Typical workday is lots of meetings, lots and lots and lots of meetings. And such a big project, such a big program, things change every 10 seconds on this kind of project. So we need to touch base quite a lot and understand where there's new challenges, where we need to get a decision, what things are going well, what things didn't go as we were planning for them to go, what things are completely new to us that we weren't expecting. So there's a lot of touching base in these meetings and figuring out, and that happens on a daily basis. So every day is full of meetings, and my role in particular, I'm much more about the executive level reporting. So again, not much pure engineering in terms of design, but about that relationship management side of things. So I think there was someone somewhere had a question about if it's not just maths and science, what else can you do? With engineering, you can really go into so many different broader aspects because your mind works that way. You're used to finding solutions to problems people don't even know exist. And relationships are so critical to that. So my role at the airport right now is all that executive level kind of report that needs to happen. So some of our project managers say we need to get the decision made, whatever it is, and help them figure out how we can get the CEO to sign off on whatever it is that needs signed off, whilst having all the information to make those decisions. So if I were to I'm just going through this list that you had, Gohar, which is really helpful, so I appreciate that. Special knowledge, skills, abilities, and education that's necessary. So like I said, in the UK, the education system is very different, and I'm more than happy to explain if anyone wants to know how that works. But the beauty of something like engineering is I can pick up that degree that I've got and go anywhere in the world with it. So that's something that I think we sometimes forget, is that with the work that we're doing and what you guys are studying, you can take it anywhere in the world, because thankfully the laws that govern things like maths and physics and chemistry, they tend to stay the same everywhere in the world. So we're pretty lucky with that. I would say we have to work in teams and everything, especially as civil engineers. We rely on so many other different types of engineers and architects and planners and everything. Teamwork is critical. No one person delivers a civil engineering project. Being able to work in a team, you have to take direction, give direction, and to be able to give feedback and things like that are very critical and useful, well-rounded skills to have as an engineer. And then advantages and disadvantages. I think I've touched on a couple of these. Again, the global aspect has been a huge deal for me. I've traveled to places I didn't even know I could pronounce through my work. I've met incredible people, really intelligent people. I think the thing that's really interesting about engineering, particularly in the UK, I don't know if it's the same here in the US, engineering, things like engineering and architecture are seen as very elitist. So only if you know someone who's done it will you have an idea of what it's about. So it's seen as very elitist, and it kind of gives an impression. Like when I tell people that I'm a civil engineer, the first question I normally get is, really? That's normally the first response. So, because people don't expect, I guess, a woman, of my background and things like that to be a civil engineer, but here we are. So it's quite elitist. So it's kind of hard to break down some of those, but 15 years in the industry, and we've come a long way. When I first started in 2007, in an office of 300 people, I was one of 3 female engineers, so that gives an idea. And now, like, we have so many incredible female engineers in leadership positions. And, the recent CEO we had at LAX, for example, a woman called Deborah Flint, she was a CEO of the 5th busiest airport in the world. It gives you an idea of just how the industry is changing. So there's a lot of hope. So there's still some struggles, there's still a lot of silos, still a lot of preconceived notions and stereotypes, but a lot of those have been broken down. There are some very long hours for sure. There's been times when I've been on construction sites from 7 a.m. till 3 a.m., like the whole day. And then I've gone home, got a couple of hours of sleep, and back out there again. There are some really long hours. But as with any career, you can make it however you want. If you want to do those hours, you can do those hours. If you want to change your jobs and move into different parts, you can do that like I did. I know some people in my company who've done the same job that they did, they started on day one, they've been doing the same thing for 20 years. So it's really up to you how you want to shape your career. So I think something like engineering gives you the ability to be flexible, to go anywhere in the world with it, and to make it fit your lifestyle, because especially in this day and age, we're very much used to the agile working, so it kind of really fit into your lifestyle much better. And internships, actually doing those 2 internships. So what's interesting, I actually did an internship in a financial institution as well, because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I tried it in a financial institution and I absolutely hated it. I was like, this is not for me. They're all greedy. They just care about money. It's not for me. I don't want to do it. And then I did an internship in a municipality. So the environment agency is a municipality. It's the government owned agency. And then I also did it in a private owned agency, and seeing the differences and what I wanted, what I liked. And I just thought with a private owned agency, the ability for me to kind of, 1, understand what my potential might be, and 2, kind of realize from that potential was a lot bigger. So I really felt those internships were helpful to me, and I would recommend, before you get into the industry and everything, try as much as you can. And you can go into anything, anywhere. I started off as a traffic engineer, then I did business development. Now I do some executive level reporting, and it's all over the world. So it's really quite a fascinating choice, and kind of, I hope, pretty interesting for, at least for me, hopefully for some of you guys too.
Thank you so much, Neera. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Full of so much experience. You've contributed so much to the field of civil engineering from all over the world. That's amazing. You really can go in so many directions, right? So we're going to, if there are any questions for Neera, we'll take 1 question for the sake of time, and then we'll do overall questions at the end. If there are any questions for Neera, raise your hand or put it in the chat box. Okay, Corey, go ahead and unmute yourself and share.
Hi, Neera. Thanks for coming today, first of all. Appreciate it. I'm a civil engineering major, and I also intend to work abroad after I become a professional. My wife is Italian specifically, so I plan to work in Italy in the future. I have heard that different countries internationally require different sort of certifications for civil engineering work. Could you speak on that at all, given your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So depending on where you go, so a lot of degrees, I'm not sure if it's the same in the US, but in the UK, depending on which college or university you go to, you get an accredited degree, and you might get a degree with honors. So that is like a bare minimum anywhere else in the world. So if you want to go to Australia, if you want to go to Europe, if you want to go to the Middle East, you need to have that as a bare minimum. So bachelor's in engineering is a bare minimum that you need. And in terms of things like a PE qualification is always going to be very helpful, but just note that PE qualifications outside of the US, they don't mean anything necessarily compared to what they mean in the US. So that's just something to be mindful of. In the Middle East, for example, if you're a chartered engineer, I've seen it, I've read it, I've written it myself, that when we're employing people or looking to go onto a project or a bid for a project, they will request for a chartered engineer. So that makes a big difference. And my chartership honestly was not, I'm gonna say not that difficult, it was quite onerous, but like compared to PE, which is much more technically based, chartered engineer is much more rounded. So it's about how do you interact with society? How do you do team working? Can you do contract negotiations? It's much more rounded than just the technical side. So which is why some parts of the world request that. So in the Middle East in particular. And I think because you're going for a bachelor's in engineering, is that right, Rory?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So once you have your bachelor's equivalent in the US, I think is an equivalent of like a master's in the UK at least, and maybe even somewhere between a bachelor's and master's in Europe as well. So it's quite transferable to Italy for sure. I think the thing with engineering is to be mindful of is infrastructure investment comes in waves. So right now, the Middle East and Asia are spending a lot of money on the infrastructure. Europe, not so much, especially with what's happening with oil, what's happening with Brexit. I know we've been a part of that. All these kind of things, the political factors really impact on how infrastructure and how governments spend money on infrastructure. If governments don't spend money on infrastructure, civil engineers don't have jobs to do. That's how it fits together. The US is about to start their wave on infrastructure. You guys might have seen the infrastructure bill that's been put forward by the current administration. They're going to start spending money in infrastructure. So you'll see that spike up. There's not been a huge amount of investment in the US that much in the past kind of couple of decades. That's happened more in the Middle East and Asia. Africa doesn't happen that much, that often, to be honest. So like the Northern African countries do a little bit, and South Africa does, but the middle parts don't. Across Australia and Asia Pacific. So that's Australia's quite an interesting one, and New Zealand. These kind of things do happen, but they seem to mimic somewhere between what happens with Europe and what happens across Asia. So Europe will be going through a cycle of infrastructure investment, but right now the political kind of turmoil that's happening across Europe, that takes a couple of years to get through before infrastructure starts happening back into the European countries. The one thing I will definitely say is how things operate in different countries is very different. So even though born and raised in the UK, did all my schooling there, we have a huge amount of exposure to US culture. Moving here to the US, and even though I speak the language clearly and everything, and I understand how a lot of American things work, was still a big culture shock to me. So the foundation, I would say, is get your PE, do some of the work of actually getting in the industry, establishing yourself a little bit. That will give you the room to move anywhere else in the world. Join a company either that allows for that and they can support your visa, sponsor your visa, all those kind of things. They'll have opportunities in countries you want to go to. And don't allow yourself to become pigeonholed like from the get-go. I kind of had to break out of that a little bit. But yeah, so globally, having your bachelor's will be great. Your PE outside of the US, it kind of helps in Middle Eastern countries, but not so much in Europe because it's not recognized, because it's for American codes and for Californian codes, for example. And they, you have to deal with a lot of seismic activity here, which I've never had to deal with in the UK. We get thunderstorms, we don't get earthquakes,
Mira,
So,
thank you so much.
yeah.
I know you have so much to share. It's such a great journey and a lot of steps to share. So how can the students get connected with you?
I'm happy to again also share my email, and you can feel free to email me anytime, or even if it's through this, I'm more than happy to help and support however I can, and encourage you guys and support you on your journey into STEM.
Thank you so much for inspiring our students. We appreciate you. It's been such a wealth of knowledge to share and learn from you. And I know there's so much more. We could be here another 5 hours, I know, to learn from all of the wealth of all of everybody's knowledge. So we're going to move forward to our next panelist, Hannah Batala. She's a software engineer at Slack, and she earned her bachelor's degree in English and master's in library and information science from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And as a software engineer, she works on cloud infrastructure, So let's welcome Hannah. You have the floor, Hannah.
Thank you. My name is Hannah. Pronouns are she and her, and I'm a staff software engineer at Slack, owned by Salesforce. And I've been in software engineering for the last decade, and I was previously a librarian, and I don't have any formal education in software engineering. And I chose this path because I love fixing and building things, but also just practically speaking, you make money. So how did I get to being an engineer from being a librarian? Well, I started in college as an electrical engineer, and I interned at a semiconductor company between my sophomore and my junior year, and realized, wow, there's just not enough support for women. There was a ton of sexual harassment during my internship. This was before the Me Too movement, so I never reported anything to HR. And I was too scared to lose my internship and thought, oh, this is just how society is, and this is what my job will be like. And people looked down on me for being a woman and an Asian woman at that. And that really did a number on me. And I felt like I just can't cut it in this field or industry. So I went back to school and changed my major, and no one told me that software engineering was a thing. When I was in college, at that time, software engineering was very theory-based and academia focused. So I just picked a major that would allow me to graduate on time, and that was English. During my senior year, I was lucky enough to work for someone that recommended library and information science as a graduate program. And I didn't understand or realize at the time that librarianship was more than just working at a library. There's a lot of complex problems in that space, including data archival. And at that point in time, people were just starting to realize, wow, we are digitizing a bunch of content. We don't know how to store it. We don't know how to properly access it. And these were things that I was interested in, and gave me a different perspective on how I could solve these problems with programming. So I got a job as a digital services librarian for a university after graduating, and that meant bringing the internet to students in an academic context. And that was really meant to enable students to access data and setting up digital pathways to content, finding ways to engage with students in a more digital way. But unfortunately, the tenure track was just not for me. And I ended up applying to a job that allowed me to use my programming skills. And I didn't get that job magically. While being a librarian, I was tasked with creating the library website. And I started programming for fun again. And I started contributing to Drupal, which is an open source content management system, because that's what we were using at the time. And I started making pull requests and contributing. And this was not my first foray into website design. When GeoCities came out, I was definitely one of those people with a bunch of little avatars and Neopets and whatever stuff you put on there. So yeah, it was fun to do web design again. And fast forward 10 years, it brings me to where I am now. I'm a staff engineer, and a staff engineer is really the connective tissue between multiple teams, projects, and work streams. I'm considered like a pinch hitter, if you're familiar with sports, and I spend 50% of my time coding, pairing, and mentoring, and the other 50% of my time strategizing architecturally. And that can mean unblocking someone or something, even my own team, coming up with a vision and roadmap, where I want to take our team in the next year. And so if I can give you all advice, I would say to continue to work on the quote unquote soft skills, along with your technical skills like communication and collaboration. Problem solving is one of the most important skills you'll need to learn. And when I interview people, I look for potential. Apply for jobs, even if you don't think you meet all of the requirements. And you don't have to go to college, but courses in data science, data structures, and math really do help. And really diving into understanding one programming language is key. And you can learn by diving in and contributing. There are so many open source projects on GitHub. And finally, find people to support you. Find those who are passionate about mentoring and have them help you. And I didn't end up here by myself. So many people helped me. And when you are where I am at now, do the same. Find the time and energy to mentor people and give back. So I went very quickly because I know people will have questions and I love answering questions. So yes, any questions?
All right, everybody, this is the time. Since so many of you want to learn about the different CS opportunities, cloud engineering. If not, I have a question, Hannah.
Oh, sure.
What can you explain a little bit of a difference between, let's say, cloud architect versus a full stack developer? Because a lot of students think like CS is just this large coding aspect, but each one of the careers has its own unique coding. Would you be able to speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so there are many different spaces inside computer science. So one space one role that you may encounter is the full stack engineer, someone who likes to do the front end and the back end, where let's say you have a website and you have to design the site visually. That's what's considered the front end. And then the back end, which is all of the internals. Let's say you have a website like Shopify, where you have people checking out a product and putting it in their cart. You need to have something on the back end that allows you to commit that transaction. So in addition to that, you have something like DevOps, which is developer operations, where you're managing different types of systems. When you think about Google and how their services are run, you have millions and millions and millions of machines running different services like Maps and other, like the Google search engine. It's not all on one computer, right? That would just be terrible. Instead, there are millions and millions and millions of tiny virtual machines that you need to have someone manage and make all of the connective tissue work. So that's something that cloud would do. Then you also have security, where you need to have someone make sure that no bad actors are coming in trying to steal your data and making sure it's encrypted. Then there's also other avenues where even if you are not in one of those kind of areas, you can still use programming in your computer science degree to problem solve other things. So it's a really broad area.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying some of the variations and differences. We have a question from Martha. Thank you, Hannah, for being here. I appreciate your time. Which coding program would you recommend starting off with?
It's whatever you're comfortable with. Honestly, in college we started with Java. I hated that language. I still don't understand it. As I started working practically, Ruby became probably my favorite language. Right now it's Golang. So really anything that you can stick with is the one I would recommend. There is no like antidote or like secret. Yeah. There's a question. Is there age disadvantages in the computer science engineering field? I am 30 and looking to make a career change. I would say that this is the best time. I know many people and have helped and mentored many people who are making career changes. And as long as you have the skills and the capacity to want to learn, I think the age is not anything that would prevent you from starting.
There's another question. I'm going into SMPL to return some books. If you were to recommend only one book for software engineers, what would it be? I'd love to pick it up and delve into it. Thank you, Hannah.
Oh, right now, I don't have a very good answer for that, but right now, what I would recommend for me in this particular moment in time is good strategy, bad strategy. I think that's what it's called. I'm at the point in my career where I'm trying to make sure that I am strategizing and thinking about things holistically. So but I'll have to loop back on that question. You caught me. That was not a good answer, but
There are lots of books. I want to say there's so many different books, and every CS class probably prepares them towards the next step. So with that, is GitHub open source? GitHub open source?
GitHub itself is not open source, but that's where many people store their code. But you can find, if you just Google open source projects, GitHub, there are many lists that people have curated on projects that you can contribute to. And also just think about, what do you use in your daily life? There are probably open source versions of those things. For example, I don't know if people budget like financially, but Aspire budgeting was created from as a copycat of another program, and that's open source. And I know many people very, very involved in that community. So think about the things that you use. Just Google it and see, is it open source? And if so, contribute, or maybe there's something similar in that same vein.
Great answer. Thank you, Hannah. Google is our best friend. One of my students, actually, Karun Rat, she's asking, she wants to go into a cloud field, but not too much coding. Do you have a career field that you recommend?
Yeah, so Amazon Web Services is a very big player in the cloud infrastructure, because they're the ones, if you've seen advertisements like built on AWS or invented by AWS or whatever, there are a lot of jobs in that kind of area now, because we're moving progressively more towards hosting things into the cloud or into a digital space, right? And it's not just Amazon. Google is the same way. So you can do other things, and I would just ask yourself, like, do you like program management? Do you like things like being an advocate for customers? You could be in the customer relations section of that. Really think about like what you want to do in that area, and why does that area interest you? Because if it's just the fact that it's in the cloud, that might not be a good reason either. So
yeah, great response, Hannah. There are lots of different options and different sides, and Amazon Web Services is definitely one of the great ones. So maybe we'll take one more question. I know there are a lot of questions for you, Hannah. How many more years of engineers are going to be? Okay, I'm still debating what type of engineer I want to be. Do you recommend what I can do to help decide, or where to look?
Oh, I'm
That's a
sure.
broad question.
This is like a very heavy question. I'm sure I would ask this again when all the panelists go in the general Q&A. I'm sure they have lots of answers. For me personally, it just happened that I enjoyed programming. It was something that I did early on. I tried to get away from it, and it came back, right? So that was my answer. It was just that the universe seemed to say like, hey, you should do this. But for you, I would just try and see what fits. And it might not fit for you now. It might fit for you later.
And a good plug for the Career Center is anybody who wants to explore different careers in engineering can come meet with Gohar or myself, and we've got lots of resources to help you explore all the different careers within the engineering field.
And great advice to test drive the career before you go into it fully to the degree that you can. So thank you so much, Hannah. It was very inspirational. Vanan has her hand up, I know. So Jose, you hand your hand up. Vanan, go ahead.
Yeah, Hannah, thank you so much for being here. I just wanted to ask one quick question that we often get from students. So I know for students getting started and trying to find an internship can be really daunting. They feel like they don't have the skill set. And we often tell them that you're actually not supposed to know anything when you go in to do an internship. So often it's kind of like who you know so that you can ask, right, to get your foot in the door. Do you have any recommendations for students who are looking to kind of get a first experience or an internship or a mentor at places like Slack?
Yeah, go to every career fair you can. Talk to every recruiter that you can. You don't even have to recognize their company name or anything like that. Just talk to as many people as you can. Oftentimes, you won't be able to find what you're looking for, like exactly looking for. Your internship is not going to be your dream job, right? You'll have to make some compromises. And the way to think of this is when you're looking for an internship, think about, is this place going to allow me to grow? And is this place going to support me? That's really important. And so try to keep an open mind, go to as many career fairs as you can, utilize the services at your school. And then also don't be afraid to network with other people, even if it's not in your same major. You don't have to be, you don't have to know everyone in your computer science major or electrical engineering major. There are a lot of computer science jobs in other engineering fields because you need to have programmers to wire up how electronics works or things like that. It could be, you could work at Ford and know a mechanical engineer and get something in the computer science field. So keep your options open, try to utilize as many resources as you can, especially the ones provided by your school.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for inspiring our students and sharing your career journey. So much to learn. We appreciate your time and sharing your Monday with us today. And I know you have to leave shortly, so thank you so much. And how can students be in touch with you?
Yeah, I dropped my email address. It's hbottalla@slack-corp.com. And then, yeah, I will do my best to reach out to you if you email me.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Let's give a round of applause for Hannah. And for our next guest speaker, we have Patty Antich. She's a professional engineer. She is the president of Antich Consulting Incorporated. Her project role is a third-party manager. She earned her bachelor's degree in civil engineering and master's of science in civil engineering with the emphasis in environmental studies. She's a veteran of U.S. Air Force, where she served for 5.5 years, receiving an honorable discharge. So thank you so much for your service, Patty. And she worked on many transportation projects, including the Port of Long Beach. And then with her father's inspiration, she has really changed the face of the earth with every transportation project that she worked on. So welcome, Patty. We'll look forward to hear from you, and you have the floor. Patty.
Thank you. I'm trying to start my video, but it's not starting. I'm not familiar with, can you guys hear me at least?
We can hear you.
I'm so sorry. I'm not familiar with Zoom. I do Teams all day long and we've done WebEx, but the Zoom, I'm just really not, I'm not very comfortable with it. So can I keep talking, or do you want to walk me through how I can show my, I'll just keep talking. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. So thank you for the introduction. When I was a little girl, if you would have asked me, do you want to be an engineer when you grow up? No, that was the farthest thing from my mind. I thought I would be a singer, maybe a ballet dancer or something like that. I ended up being pretty gifted in math and science. I just had a natural affinity to it. I joined the military right out of high school. I was pretty uncertain what I wanted to do with my life. and I didn't know, I didn't know a lot of engineers. I didn't know what that looked like. So the military was a great stepping stone for me. I got some general schooling out of the way while I was in. I was introduced to, I became an aircraft mechanic. I worked on the B-1B bomber for 5.5 years. So that was, it was exhilarating, a very exhilarating time in my life. And then when I got done, when I finished my time of service, I asked my dad, you know, what do I do? I go be a mathematician because I'm good in math. I mean, I just really didn't know. And he says, well, you know, the nice thing about civil engineering is that you could be anything from a politician to a hardcore civil engineer to an executive manager at a company. You know, civil engineering in his mind was just kind of one of those jack of all trades, right? Civil engineering, it teaches you how to think, teaches you how to make decisions, how to break things down. I trusted his advice and I became a civil engineer. And when I was trying to figure out what kind of civil engineer, because like Naira has said, you can really do anything with a civil engineering degree. And he said, well, you know, the environment, the rules are only going to get stricter. So go into environment because then you'll always have a job, right? So his idea was make sure that I could take care of myself. And it was all very good advice. And I thought that I would be working, you know, at some environmental protection agency or something, but I ended up with a position at the Port of Long Beach. And it was my first introduction to transportation, which I thought, why would anyone want to go into transportation? You stand out by a highway and you count cars. Wow, that looks really boring. But man, one introduction into transportation, the Port of Long Beach, it was, oh my gosh, it has wharfs and it has buildings and it has rail and it has roads and it has traffic signals and all of that just so beautifully and magically works together to move goods and services from one place to another. It was just awesome. Just never a dull moment. And I have spent the rest of my career in transportation projects. I've worked on, I don't know if all of you are local or if some of you are local, but I've worked on all the major transportation projects in Southern California for the last 25 years. I've done 5 major metro programs, the Gold Line, the Blue Line, the Green Line, the Orange Line, the K Line, all of those. I've worked on all of them. And it's all very exciting. I did the 405 widening project. And like Naira says, you know, when you're doing projects like that, it's hard to believe that you can spend 5 years designing something before you ever see something come up out of the ground. But then finally you see something come up out of the ground and it's really exciting. And if you're lucky and you stay on the project long enough, you'll get to go on that opening ride. So to answer just some of the questions, because I know we're kind of running out of time, my typical workday starts, well, when I was younger in my career, I started earlier, but my typical workday starts around 7 and I usually end around 7. I'm in a lot of meetings. Here's an interesting thing that you may or may not understand. As an engineer, you may do more writing than you would if you were an author. I mean, I write all the time. I write letters, I write emails, I write proposals, I write agreements, you know, like master cooperative agreements with different agencies. So writing is a very important skill. Another skill that is very important is being able to communicate with one another and like in a face-to-face situation. And I know with COVID and with the younger generation, doing things by Snapchat. I don't even know what all of I don't even have a Twitter account. So I'm kind of one of the old ancient ones on the call, but I just, it's very, very important that as an engineer, you can communicate. A lot of engineering stereotypically are not very good communicators. But I've met some of the best communicators I've ever known in my life that are engineers. So I would just recommend that you keep in mind that your skill sets need to be built in a very well-rounded way, because an engineering degree will put you in situations where you need to write well, you need to present well, you need to be able to sit in front of your computer and design something well. So it's just all of it is very necessary and will all come into play. One of the things that I've done my entire career, again, on the advice of my dad, is I typically put myself in a position where I feel like I'm biting off more than I can chew. You'll notice that Gohar said that I work for Antich Consulting, and that's because I started my own business 20 years ago. I never would have thought I could start my own business, but I did, and I've been successful, and I've never been fired, and I've never been let go off of a project. And it's always bite off more than you can chew, because you will find a way to succeed, and you will learn something new every single day. And when you can come home at the end of the day and say, oh my gosh, I'm 30 years into this and I'm still learning something new. How grand is that? I can't wait to get to work in the morning, because I know something's going to come up, and I'm going to have to exercise my brain and come up with some kind of creative solution that will save the project. And it is just exciting. So I'll kind of leave it for there. I don't know if anybody has questions or wants to teach me how to get my video working. I mean, again, I'm a little technically challenged. I apologize.
Thank you so much, Patty. You have such a rich contribution to the civil engineering world, and great advice. So we'll open up the floor for questions. For Patty, either raise your hand and you can unmute yourself and share, or put it in the chat box. So the Cool Careers is actually scheduled to go until 5:50. So if you're able to stay, we have 2 more amazing speakers you do not want to miss. Civil and software engineering, everybody brings different perspectives. So we encourage you to stay until the end. Thank you so much, Patty. Any questions from the audience?
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Patty. We appreciate your time and dedication and being here today. And how can students stay in touch with you, Patty, if there's a way?
I will drop my email into the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We appreciate you and sharing your career journey with us today. So we are going to go to Steve Davis, who is our next speaker. He is a civil engineer. He's currently a consultant. He started at Pasadena City College and graduated from Cal Poly SLO in civil engineering. He currently works as a consultant and previously worked at Pinnacle One and as an independent contractor. So he held many various different roles as a project manager, including subways, wastewater, water treatment facilities, highways, bridges, ports, airports, hospital, education facilities, and more. Steve, you have so much that you bring to the table. And after 40 years in the business, he still loves what he does and could not think of a better career path. So we welcome you, Steve, and you have the floor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Oh, good. So I thought I'd because civil engineering is such a cool thing, I think it makes it so cool, the projects that we have. So I wanted just to kind of give a snapshot of some of the stuff that I've worked on over my career, because I think it just illustrates how diverse field that we have in civil engineering. one of the first jobs I worked on out of college was the Space Launch Complex #6 up at Vandenberg Air Force Base, the place where they're launching the SpaceX rockets these days. That tower there is 20 stories tall. I was up there when it was under construction. I was a steel inspector, and I stood on the top of that thing looking down 20 stories. It was an awesome experience. I worked at the Hyperion wastewater treatment facility in the city of Los Angeles, $1 billion plus upgrade to that facility. This facility is vital to the city of Los Angeles, and there's billions of more dollars going to be poured into this facility over the next few years in trying to reclaim some of the water that now pours into the Santa Monica Bay. Along with Patty, I also worked on the Red Line project for Metro, the Blue Line, the Gold Line, the Expo Line, several of these lines, and walked through the tunnels as these massive tunnel boring machines were digging through the city of Los Angeles. I've done a lot of work over the years with the Port of Los Angeles, also the Port of Long Beach. And as Patty mentioned, it's an incredible infrastructure that we have right here at our doorstep. Across the country, I worked at the Boston Central Artery, transformed the city. It was an opportunity to get out of California and to see something else. And it was an incredible civil engineering project. Here closer to home, talk about diversity. I worked on the St. John's Healthcare Center in Santa Monica, worked on several different hospitals. Even going to a luxury hotel, working on this project, Four Seasons Hotel in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So again, there's a lot of things you can do with this field. Even the Jurassic World ride at Universal Studios, I got involved in the construction of that facility, and presently working on the project at LAX, the People Mover project. And here you see the People Mover in action, these blue cars here. Eventually, you see very little traffic down here on the Horseshoe because it's all going to be up here eventually in these automated cars with 4 or 3 stations within the central core and walkways that connect to each of the terminals. So those are just a few of the projects that I've been able to work on over my 40-year career. And getting to your list of questions here, you know, it's some of the stories that we've heard before I got on here, they're pretty amazing. The individuals that we have on this panel here, and I'm really am blessed to have been, you know, had the career that I've had. And it was a bit unlikely, I would say, at the beginning. When I got out of high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Went to Pasadena City College for a while, tried to explore some different things, really couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And then I ended up joining the Army, enlisting in the Army, where I learned to become a artillery surveyor of all things. And the one thing I learned about the Army is what I did not want to do with my life. But I found that there was I had a certain aptitude towards math that I didn't really realize, and saw then that maybe a career in engineering might be the thing to do. So I came back and then got lucky enough to get into Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and with the GI Bill, made it through. And let me tell you, it was the toughest thing I'd ever done in my life. The math and the physics and the chemistry were extremely challenging. And there were many times when I thought I couldn't make it, but I stuck to it. And a lot of people run up against that wall. And let me tell you, once you get through that, it's much, much easier. And I don't ever apply the differential equations or the physics problems to the current work that I'm doing. So it's a tough road to go, but it's worth every bit of it. Why did I choose my career path? You know, when I got into civil engineering, as I think a lot of people said, they don't really, it's hard to figure out exactly what you want to do, but one of the first jobs I had was with Army Corps of Engineers, and they put me on a year-long training program. I thought when I got out of school, I wanted to be a structural engineer, but I found out that the structural engineering department was really pretty dead. There wasn't a lot going there. It was not that interesting. And then I kind of moved over to construction, and construction was where the action was. It was where the kind of the rubber meets the road. It was where things were really happening and people were working hard, and there was a certain urgency to it. And so from the beginning of my career, I kind of just gravitated more towards the construction management side of things, and that's where I've been ever since. Typical workday early in my career, I think, as everybody said, there's a lot of hours. I mean, if within civil engineering, about half the civil engineers work for public agencies. They're public employees, and for the most part, they work a regular 8-hour day. But if you get into private practice, where the other half of the engineers are, either in working for consulting firms or for contractors, you're working 10 hours a day early in your career or more. It's part of the package that you buy into there. What's special skills and knowledge? Well, 4 years of degree, to get the bachelor's degree, I think is a bare minimum for civil engineering. Many civil engineers go on to get a master's today. I never did get a master's. I tried to do it at night school, but it was too challenging. So I ended up just going with my bachelor's, and frankly, it never held me back. But there are a lot today, I think, that it makes a good competitive sense to have a master's degree. What are the advantages and disadvantages of the job? Well, I say it's all what you make of it. You have to love it. And so, I mean, any job can have disadvantages. And I think that, one of the things that's true about engineering is that we're kind of at the whims of the economy. When I got out of school and going way back to 1982, we were in the middle of a recession, and they were laying engineers off everywhere. And, a lot of engineers probably ended up moving, never even working in the field. But I was lucky enough to find a job eventually. And so, we are kind of at the whims of the economy, so that getting that first job is awfully sometimes can be challenging. Discussed internships, your career path. I'd say that, while I was going to school, I got a job as a land surveyor. And so I worked part-time all the way through going to school, 20 hours a week. So I was able to adjust my schedule, and not only did it, give me some extra money, but it also gave me some very invaluable experience. So I did land surveying, and I also would go back to the office and work on plot plans and that sort of thing. So I got some drafting skills as well out of it, and that became something I could add to my resume. So I think that having that sort of opportunity is a good thing too. At the Corps of Engineers, I mentioned that I went through the training program, so that was a good experience as well. And then, lastly, that in the field of engineering, it's constantly evolving. It's a lifelong commitment to learning, and so it really never stops. And so there are always training classes to take and other things all throughout your career in order to stay up on the profession. What are the necessary steps students must take to prepare themselves for the position you hold? Well, first of all, you got to get through that math, physics, and chemistry. It gets better after that. And you've got to get that 4-year degree at least. One of the things, if you're going to be going into civil engineering, is that you want to start thinking about, before you get out of school, is sitting for what's called the Engineer in Training exam. It is a step that all professional engineers have to go through. The Engineer in Training exam is very heavy on basic math, physics, and science questions. And so you want to do it while you're still in school, ideally in your senior year while you're going to the university. Once you graduate and once you start working in the field, you have to have 4 years of experience before you sit to take the professional engineer's exam. So, you know, early on, you need to start thinking about this process in order to get those professional licenses. Additional information, I'd say, you know, getting involved in things like the American Society of Civil Engineers. There's also an organization, Construction Management Association of America. There's several other groups. I would strongly recommend that you start attending some of the events locally. They often have even scholarship programs for students. And so I would, by all means, encourage you to get involved in those sorts of things. They become very important in your career later on, not only for getting, you know, professional training in your field, but also meeting other people in the field and networking and finding job opportunities. So that's, and I know we're pressed on time, so that's kind of a quick nutshell of my very cool and exciting career that I've had. Thank you very much for having me. I feel honored.
Thank you so much, Steve. I love seeing all of the amazing projects you worked on. It's incredible to see how much we're able to work and build all of these amazing infrastructures. And I've actually have taken a field trip with my students to the Hyperion. It's quite complex. So just thinking about the complexity that goes into it. So we'd love to ask you questions. If you have questions, please input it in the chat box or raise your hand. If not, I have a question.
Okay.
Oh, Eduardo just posted a question. How did you know which school you wanted to go to and that civil engineering was the field to go into?
You know, the thing that attracted me to Cal Poly, there were two things. Number one was it's a well-known engineering school, Cal Polytechnics University. I mean, it has a real specialty in engineering, so it was something that attracted me because of that. Secondly, at Cal Poly, both Cal Poly Pomona and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, they have a motto that says "Learn by doing." And so it's very much a hands-on sort of university. There's a lot of labs at Cal Poly, as opposed to some of the other universities, some of the University of California, for example, UCLA or Berkeley, they tend to be a little bit more theoretical. But you know, Cal Poly has this great reputation also among companies that are hiring. So that was one of the things that attracted me. The other thing was that San Luis Obispo is just a beautiful place to live. I loved living up there. So that was one of the things that attracted me. And I guess the second part of the question was civil engineering, what field to get into, right? Yeah, so when I was in the Army, you know, it was just kind of by chance that I ended up learning to be a surveyor in the Army. And surveying is actually kind of a sub-discipline of civil engineering. And so that kind of was the first introduction. And I, you know, as a land surveyor, I worked on some subdivision projects and road work type of work where, you know, I was the guy out there with the transit, you know, in the middle of the road doing that. And so that's part of civil engineering. So that kind of got me interested in the field. At Cal Poly, there used to be a saying that said that the civil engineers are the ones that built the targets and the mechanical engineers were the ones that built the bombs that blew up the targets. So because a lot of mechanical engineers end up going to aerospace companies and that sort of thing. So I was one of the ones that built the targets. We built the bridges and the ports and the airports and water treatment facilities. So.
That's amazing. And thank you so much for being here today, Steve, and sharing your amazing inspirational journey. We'll take one more question and then saving a lot that's for the best. We are almost there, Abba. We have one more presenter from software engineering. So we will just quickly have one more question. You mentioned that there's an engineering exam and the profession engineering exam. Can you tell us about your experience through that? So what is the professional engineering exam and your experience with it?
So the professional engineering exam, so in order to practice engineering in California or any of the states, you have to become licensed. It is illegal to go out and to do engineering without having a license. And that license allows you to stamp plans and to make calculations. If you don't have it, you can't practice really. So what the professional engineer's exam is it's a battery of tests. It takes 2 days of test. And so they have, like in the morning session, they'll have multiple choice sort of questions. And then in the afternoon session, they usually have 4 technical problems that you have to tackle that require, handwritten calculations. And so, and then the second day in California is focused on seismic design, because seismic engineering is so important in California. And so, in order to qualify to take the test, you have to first pass the engineer and trainings exam, which as I mentioned earlier, is focused primarily on the basic sciences. The math, physics, chemistry, those sorts of subjects. And so you want to do that while you're in school, if at all possible. Don't wait too long. I had some friends that they never got that word and they didn't take that exam until later. And you tend to forget a lot of that stuff once you get away from school. So take it while you're in school. And then you have to work in your profession for 4 years. And then once you've done that, you can sit for the professional engineer exams. It's through the State Department of Consumer Affairs, and it's an agency that that oversees all the licenses.
Definitely a long journey, but well worth it, like you said, Steve. After 40 years being in the field, it's a rewarding field to go into. So thank you so much, Steve. We appreciate your time and sharing your journey. It was very insightful and inspiring our students for their future careers. So our next speaker is Apple Yahinian. Apple works as a software engineer, senior principal, and he currently works at Science Application International Corporation. He earned his Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science from Cal Poly Sloan again, and Master's in Systems Engineering degree from University of Detroit Mercy. He worked on many projects, including special project on Space Track. So welcome, Apple, and you are the best speaker at the end. So we welcome you, and you have the floor.
So thank you for inviting me. And my name is Appel, and I apologize for the headset. Unfortunately, my webcam decided to lose its ability to capture any input. So my official job title is Software Engineer Senior Principal, which really just means I'm old. But I began my career first in the commercial world, self-employed, eventually becoming a CTO for a startup in San Francisco, before I discovered that that really wasn't very healthy for me from a purely medical standpoint. I was working a lot of hours, not getting exercise. I hadn't really changed my diet, and I ended up deciding that that kind of life wasn't how I wanted to spend it. So I ended up moving to the Department of Defense. So I work for SAIC is how we say it. I worked at Lockheed Martin originally. Actually, I also have worked at Vandenberg, now Space Force Base. I have toured the slicks. We built the ROC. It's called the ROC, the Western Range Operations Command Center. And yeah, so ironically, we share a lot of places in common. The project I'm currently attached to, it's really about sharing data about objects in space. We work with SpaceX, we work with all the mega constellation people, we work with Amazon Kuiper, we work with, you name it, we work with them virtually on a daily basis, Digital Globe, and additionally the foreign partner nations. So we do a lot of data sharing. As to why I chose my career path, honestly, for me, it was very simple. I've always been kind of attracted to programming. So for me, it was very simple. Obviously, you will you're struggling with that question now, and you will continue to struggle. Most of you will continue to struggle with that question, and perhaps have a resurgence of that as you get older. You know, did I pick the right career? Is this really what I want to do? That kind of thing. It's natural. There's nothing wrong with that. You are going to experience that kind of questioning and doubt. Life is what you make of it. So find out what you enjoy and then go after that. A typical work day for me has evolved, obviously, over the years. I have gone from being your generic level cube trapped code monkey, where we churn out, you know, some case locks of code, and then now I constantly am getting pulled off to have business development meetings, to meet with different groups like SpaceX and Amazon to plan larger architected solutions where my perspective has changed. But typically, I mean, I got very lucky that I was able to work a relatively 9-to-5 day. Sometimes, as I said, when I was working in the commercial world, and this is true on the military side as well, that you can get trapped into, you know, exceedingly long hours, 50 or 60 hours, 70 hours, 80 hours, because we are salaried, that kind of a thing. So the only advice I can give is, you know, when you have those interviews, when you talk to those companies, ask about what your pattern of life is for your job, find out what the work environment is, find out how many bosses you're going to report to, because if it's anything more than 2, you need to be very, very careful. That's probably not going to be a happy environment to work in. Ask about job turnover. Those are all going to be issues that will significantly impact. Remember that when you go to work, even when you get married, you're going to be spending as much time, if not more, with the people you're working with than you are with your own family, right? Just simple fact. So in terms of how I do today, follow the Agile Scrum methodology. For those of you who are in programming, you're probably well aware of that. So we have, besides our planning and then our review and retrospective days, we have a daily Scrum that takes about 15 minutes for the team. I'm also a certified Scrum Master. And then we just go into grinding out our tasks. We have operations and maintenance type work to do. Our stack of technology involves on-prem, you know, bare metal type work. We also do a lot of work in the cloud. So we use GCP, Google Cloud. So if there are any questions, happy to answer about those. But that's generally what my workday is like. A lot of meetings, which I try to stay away from. They're the death of productivity. And they're just, some people make a living out of having meetings and moving from meeting to meeting, but I personally don't enjoy that. So moving on from there, special knowledge skills, frankly, it really boils down to the job you do and the company you go to. So generically, you're in computer science. I'm speaking to the computer science folks. So you're in computer science, you know how to write programs, you know how to write code, understand technology, understand the stack. I technically count as a full stack developer because on the contract I'm on now, there's only 6 of us and we're responsible for massive infrastructure. So there's no days off and there's no ability to just kind of be like, oh, well, this is definitely your job, not my problem. So from front end to middleware to back end, database administration, we do all of it. We do Google Cloud provisioning, we do everything you talk to, and there's certainly a lot there. But as you advance your career, the kinds of questions and problems that you run into will change. So when you first begin your career, you will be focusing on smaller scale problems, solve this particular problem, turn in a chunk of code, pull requests, whatever, have merge request, peer review, move on. As you get older and advance in your career, you will have the option to move to a higher level, really dealing more with architecture, more holistic comprehensive solutions where you deal with like system of systems, how do they interface, how modular are they, that kind of a thing. That said, the technical aside, I will try and foot stomp this as much as possible, regardless that you're in a STEM field. Never, ever dismiss the value of good interpersonal skills. So a wise man once told me that you don't get paid what you're worth, you get paid what you can negotiate. and the ability to communicate at all levels, whether you're talking at like a techno geek entry level kind of code monkey level to the general officer or the senior executive level, to the guy hammering the keyboard. I mean, that's an absolute must. Know how to communicate effectively, and make sure you understand your audience. So always tailor what you're saying. Always ask the question, you know, who's there? What's the agenda? What are we trying to accomplish? And then have that in the back of your mind as you go through things. How did I identify my specialty in engineering? I didn't. I just kind of worked and then tried to take care of my family. And then as I moved on, I got pulled from one job to another, usually towards the places I was strongest in, which is why I ended up becoming kind of a solutions architect, really. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why my company decided to pay for my master's degree. And if you're not aware, most companies, once you have been working there, usually do have some kind of program that will allow you to go and get your master's degree, your graduate level, whatever, even PhDs, they will pay up to a certain amount. So don't be afraid to ask. Let's see. Besides that, advantages and disadvantages, it depends. Commercial is different than government work or Department of Defense work. For my current job, I have very flexible work hours, which is, and this varies even from contract to contract. So very flexible work hours. I get to do a lot of problem solving, which, as was mentioned before, always super fun. I love solving problems. I get a lot of independence. We're proverbially far from the flagpole, so we get to make a lot of our own decisions. Get a lot of responsibility and leeway provided by our government customer, and I get to meet big name people all the time. Like if you're anywhere in the space, like Moriba Yah, Goldie from SpaceX, I mean, we meet these people, and that again depends on what job you decide to go after. I'm also very lucky that I'm part of a team of extremely mission committed coworkers. So again, asking about that job environment is very key. A job with a lot of turnover usually indicates a problem, right? So if you ask them how many people have left in the last, you know, however long, that generally indicates an issue. I've been very lucky. As for internships, I didn't really do any internships. I had a job already set up when I was graduating. Unfortunately, that company ended up not panning out almost immediately, as in I walked into the lobby and they told me, sorry, we defunded the position, go find another job. So while I was trying to pay for my girlfriend to go through college, I struggled very quickly to try and find something to do in the between. I ended up being self-employed, filing taxes like that, which is you pay double taxes. That's always fun. But yeah, I mean, didn't really have an internship. So necessary steps to take the position I hold: learn programming, which you should already be learning. Learn cloud. If you haven't learned it, learn it. There are very few positions. I mean, there are plenty of positions that if you really just want to do code, you can. But I mean, the future of most solutions is going to be some form of cloud. At the very least, you're probably going to have to interface with it at some point. So knowing it, even if you don't use it, is better than not. I found that as I got older and began working, that when I got into other things like working in the middleware, doing database administration, it very heavily began to influence the solutions I produced, because I would produce solutions that had that perspective in mind. So I didn't have the DBA coming up and getting mad at me about something I wrote that wasn't very efficient. It seemed efficient from a code perspective, but it was terrible for the database, and I was doing terrible things with a fork. Let's see. Practice and refine your social skills. Kind of already talked about that. Public speaking, etc. I've spoken at conferences before, you know, hundreds of people. I can't count the number of times it's been a significant differentiator for me. So make sure you do that. And finally, I have a bunch of basically just short statements that I don't know, I wouldn't call them aphorisms, but don't get caught up in the perfect solution. The good enough that can actually get built is infinitely more valuable than the ideal that never gets built. Too often we get focused on, here's how it should be. Should is a magic word. Don't use that. Here's what we can accomplish. In general, as you move through your career, strongly recommend that you learn to think beyond the here and now. So think and ask about what's going to happen tomorrow. What are the second, third, fourth order ramifications of the decisions I'm making right now? That applies whether you're talking about career or if you're talking about code, right? So think about what you're going to impact and how that's going to impact you. And as much as I hate to say it, because I hate it, I truly hate it, but when and where possible from a coding perspective, practice MVP. So your minimal viable product, again, get something built, get something out. We do Agile, so every 2 weeks, we got to have something that ships. Build incrementally, start small, build big, right? It's easier to do that than it is to try and design some massive system and then have it fall apart because you didn't consider all the interfaces properly. As you go through your career, under promise, over deliver. Never overstate what you can do. Okay. So the best way to burn bridges and make people upset is to promise something and then waste their time and their money. So make sure you under promise, over deliver. Also remember, as smart as you people are, and you are smart being here and pursuing these kinds of careers, none of us are as smart as all of us. So be prepared to share credit. And there's nothing wrong with standing up in a team and saying, hey, I did this. In fact, every time I have an opportunity, I always call out someone else that did something to help me. So make sure that you share that credit and then make sure that you pull people in when you don't know. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. Your job is to put the best solution out there. So, you know, just don't be afraid to ask questions. Also try new things. Broad awareness will at least let you know what you don't want to do. So learn, always learn. Don't be afraid to try new things, even if it's hard, right? Those scars that you get, they're the wisdom that you're going to have as you make future decisions. And I think I've just about gone through my entire spiel. So I leave it there. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. And I'll put my email into the chat. So if anyone has any questions or needs a follow-up, they can. Thank you.
Wow. That is so much wisdom, knowledge, and holistic way of sharing with the students, not only your career journey, but what can they do to really be successful in life, career, and their journey. That was incredible. Thank you so much. I feel like you can probably go on another hour, and I wish we could be here for another hour. So we would love to invite you and Steve and the rest of the speakers back. Are there questions for Appel? And I have a question if nobody has a question, because you just seem to have so much to be able to share. Oh, somebody's saying this might be a dumb question, but did you mean learning cloud? Is that like a coding program? What is cloud? What are you referring to learn cloud?
Okay, so we kind of got into this with Hannah. So the cloud is really just computers, right? It's what you're essentially doing is buying compute time with someone else's hardware. That's all the cloud is. Now, to interface with those systems, there's two ways you can do it. There's the infrastructure in place in order to build a system just like you would like a bare metal. So does it have a processor? How much RAM is it going to have? All that kind of stuff. That requires not quite coding, but a certain level of understanding of infrastructure stuff. I mean, you write a lot of YAML files. So again, I'm using a lot of acronyms. I'm sorry. I assume that those who are in this field are already somewhat aware of this. But so there is a kind of that where you're building infrastructure. Then using that infrastructure like cloud functions, that kind of a thing, you do write code. That can usually be in whatever languages the cloud supports. When I say learn cloud in a very general way, I'm saying understand all of that. Now, you don't have to be particularly deep, right? And someone asked, hey, can I become a cloud person without being very technical? And the answer is yes, because understanding the services that the cloud offers, whether it's Amazon or Google, like they have data streaming services, they have data ingestion services, they have machine learning capabilities. Understanding the offerings that are available, you can then advise other people and become advocates for a particular design pattern or methodology to other companies and other people that need it. So you don't necessarily have to be a coder at all. I mean, obviously it would help you, but you don't have to be. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of terminology that's specific to the industry. Completely understand. I'm really curious also, how do you keep up with all of the changes and the innovations? There's just so much, and I know it's evolving. Students actually say that by the time they're graduating, the code already, changed and developed. Is there a strategy to stay competitive with the skill sets?
So the answer is, I will kind of take issue with the way it's been characterized. So yes, in the technological world, things change extremely rapidly. That being said, the languages you're going to learn today are almost guaranteed to be useful and used, 10 years from now. We still use C, we still use C++. I mean, for heaven's sake, we're still using COBOL. And those COBOL programmers that are around now, because the entire banking industry runs on it, they're drawing in, immense salaries because they're so rare. So I kind of take issue with, hey, how this thing changes so fast. I can't keep pace with it. Once you learn a programming language and you get deep in one, every other programming language more or less fundamentally the same. The only thing that changes is the idiosyncrasies between the languages. So, it uses a verb this way and that kind of a thing. It's not that difficult to keep up. That being said, there are other technical advancements, right? The cloud changed everything, mostly because it blurs the lines between a regular developer and someone who would be a system administrator. So now you have a much wider domain that you have to be responsible for to be effective there. That being said, again, so to keep pace, just keep learning, try new things. It's once you get out into the world and at a job, a lot of these things will just kind of become a natural part of your rhythm as you go to work and you do things. And if you're not learning, we call stagnation. If you're not learning, that's an indicator that something about your job has to change. So consider that. If your job is not supporting you getting certifications or getting a degree or any of those kinds of things, at least helping you, that's problematic, because you are the company's resource and they should be looking to improve you.
Great advice, and to the point. So with that, we're going to wrap up today's Engineering Cool Careers. Thank you so much. It has been amazing to learn about everything. And we appreciate your time, everybody who was here, who joined us. And if you have last minute questions, please, you can insert it in the chat box. Just a few reminders, students, thank you so much for joining in. Make sure you indicated your name in the sign-in sheet so you can receive credit for it. Also, we have cool careers coming up in health careers tomorrow, and sustainability and environmental science one coming up on Thursday, if you'd like to participate on those. I want to say big thank you to all of the speakers for spending time today with us. We would love to hear from you again and stay in touch. Abel, how do we stay in touch with you? How do students stay connected with you if there's an option?
I posted my email address, but I'll repost it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I want to thank the STEM team. This is possible because of Vanan. She's our fearless leader. She works tirelessly to support all of our students, coordinating and helping our students to support them with all of the different ways. And today's panel was possible because of her amazing work that she is dedicated, committing to helping you. So thank you, Vanan. We appreciate you. It's amazing to be able to have panels like this to help the students realize their career journeys. And you have inspired everybody so much with this process of learning about all of the different steps and the twists and the turns and the complexities of each field. So we want to thank you, everybody. I want to thank Sheridan as well so much for helping us coordinate and recruit the speakers and bringing everybody together. It has been such an amazing journey to be able to work together to bring this for our students. I want to thank all of our students. This was your journey. to take on opportunity to learn about the different engineering careers. Every time I hear speakers, I'm learning something new. So that's the advice that all of the speakers gave you. Try something new and then learn. Every time is a learning opportunity. So I really commend you for your courage to be here today. I know had a lot to cover. This is a lot to be able to learn and take in. I also want to remind you that stay connected with the Career Center, and we would love to see you and continue to support you. We also have with us Jose. He's our full-time academic counselor. He has helped so many students in STEM that have transferred and now are successful alumni. And we thank you, Jose, for being here and supporting our students. And we also thank Paulette for being here and supporting us with all of the administrative logistics. We appreciate you. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Gohar. We applaud you.
I wanted to say thank you to Gohar and Rochelle and everyone who worked on pulling the event together. And I just have to say one more thing that, you know, one of the awesome things about Apel is that he has a really, really cool sister. So, I mean, he couldn't have done it on his own. Let's not forget that. But yes, thank you to all the students. I hope that they found this helpful. We have another great panel coming up later this week. And if there's anything they want to see, that they should let us know so that we can work on putting together content that they find helpful and useful. Because we're not doing this for us, we're doing this for them. So please, please keep in touch with us. And again, wonderful job. Thank you everyone who put in time and effort, and thank you to all our speakers. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.